In October 2017, in a ballroom in Thailand, a man in a sparkling shirt stood on a stage, grabbed a microphone, and screamed the name of a cryptocurrency until 2,000 people screamed it back at him. The video went around the world. It is still, to this day, one of the most watched moments in the history of crypto. People who have never bought a single coin can do the impression, but everybody was so busy laughing at the man on the stage that almost nobody asked the obvious question. What was he actually selling? A coin that promised you 1% a day, every day, forever. Put money in, and a secret piece of software would trade it for you and pay you, like clockwork, around 1%, not a year, not a month. A day. At its peak, the people in that room and millions like them had pushed it to a market value of around $2.5 billion. And then, on a single day in January 2018, it switched off. And almost all of that money disappeared in a matter of hours. BitConnect. This is the story of the most infamous Ponzi scheme in the history of crypto. How a promise that was impossible on its face convinced a global army to recruit each other into it, and why the man who built it has never spent a single day in a cell. BitConnect appeared in 2016, presented to the world as an open-source cryptocurrency with its own coin. BitConnect Coin, ticker BCC, and a founder who, for a long time, was barely more than a name. He went by Satish Kumbhani, and he was based in India. But the coin was never really the point. The point was the lending program. Here is how it was pitched. You would buy BitConnect Coin with your Bitcoin. Then you would lend that coin back to the BitConnect platform. And in return, BitConnect's proprietary trading software, a so-called volatility bot, would use your money to trade the wild swings of the crypto market and pay you interest. Daily interest of around 1%. 1% a day does not sound like much. That is exactly why it worked. It sounds modest, reasonable even, a single percent. But money does not add when you leave it in, it compounds. At 1% a day, compounding, $1,000 becomes more than $3,000 in 4 months. Left alone for a single year, it becomes nearly $40,000. Leave it for 2 years, and the calculator promised you more than $1 million. The platform even told you so. It published that calculator. It showed you the curve going to the moon, and it invited you to dream on it. And to make sure you didn't just dream alone, BitConnect bolted on the second engine, the one that turned a scheme into a movement. It was a referral program, a multi-level structure. If you brought in new investors, you earned a commission on what they put in, and a piece of what the people they recruited put in, cascading down through the levels beneath you. So your incentive was no longer just to invest, it was to evangelize, to pull your friends, your family, strangers on the internet into the same promise because their deposit paid you too. That is why the man on the stage in Thailand was screaming. That is why there were thousands of him on YouTube, on Facebook, in WhatsApp groups all over the world. Every one of them a salesman, every one of them certain. They weren't lying to you exactly. Most of them genuinely believed it. Because for a while the dashboard really did pay. The coin climbed. From cents to a few dollars to tens of dollars and on up. The believers got richer on paper by the day, and they shouted about it, and more people came. There was only one small problem with the whole magnificent machine. The trading bot at the center of it, the thing that was supposed to be generating all this money, no one outside BitConnect had ever seen it work. Let's talk about that bot. According to BitConnect, a sophisticated piece of software was reading the volatility of the Bitcoin market and trading it so skillfully that it could pay every investor roughly 1% every single day, no matter what the market did. Up days, down days, crashes, rallies. The bot just kept printing the same beautiful number. According to the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, and later the Department of Justice, that bot did not exist. There was no evidence it had ever made a single trade. The steady, magical 1% was not coming from trading the market. It was coming from the only place it ever comes from. It was coming from the next person in the door. The daily interest paid to early investors was simply the deposits of later investors, handed back up the line. That is the entire mechanism of a Ponzi scheme, a fraud named after Charles Ponzi. a man who ran exactly this trick almost a century earlier, with postage coupons instead of cryptocurrency. You are not being paid a return. You are being paid with the next victim's money and told it's a return. And now look again at that promise. 1% a day forever. With clear eyes, it was never a description of an investment. It was a description of how fast the scheme had to find new money to survive. Because the compounding cuts both ways. The same curve that made the early believers rich meant BitConnect's obligations were doubling roughly every 2.5 months. To pay everyone their daily 1%, it needed an ever larger flood of new deposits, forever accelerating. The day that flood slowed, not stopped, just slowed, the whole thing had to fall over. It was not a question of if, it was a question of when, and how many people would be standing underneath it. Plenty of people saw it. They said so loudly in real time. The co-founder of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, called it a Ponzi scheme out loud. Other prominent voices in crypto warned anyone who would listen that the returns were impossible and the structure was textbook fraud. Securities regulators in the United Kingdom had already put the company on notice, but warnings are quiet and the dashboard was loud. The coin kept climbing. By the end of 2017, at the very height of the great crypto mania, when it felt like everything only went up, BitConnect Coin passed $400 a coin, and its total value crossed somewhere around $2.5 billion. It was, briefly, one of the 20 most valuable cryptocurrencies on Earth, and the people inside it had never been happier. The end did not come from a hack or a market crash or a rival. It came from a letter. On the 4th of January 2018, the Texas State Securities Board issued an emergency cease and desist order against BitConnect, accusing it of offering unregistered securities and of running, in plain terms, a scheme. Days later, North Carolina regulators followed with their own order. For a machine that survived only as long as new money kept flooding in, those letters were poison. The flood didn't just slow. Confidence cracked, and the people at the edges started trying to pull their money out at once. And on the 17th of January 2018, BitConnect did the only thing a Ponzi scheme can do when the new money stops. It announced it was shutting down its lending and exchange platform. Effective immediately, it blamed the regulators, it blamed bad press, it blamed denial of service attacks on its servers. It told its investors it would convert all their locked up BitConnect coin back into cash at a set price and pay them out. What happened next took about an hour. The price of BitConnect coin fell off a cliff. From more than $400, it collapsed toward a single dollar, and then below it, a drop of more than 90% almost instantly. Billions of dollars in paper wealth evaporated between one refresh of the screen and the next. And the cruelty of the structure revealed itself in full. The whole army that had recruited each other into BitConnect, the believers, the evangelists, the man on the stage, and the thousands like him, were left holding a coin that was now worth essentially nothing, and that nobody on earth wanted to buy. The compounding millions on their dashboards had never been real money. They had been a number in a database, backed by the deposits of people who came after them. And now there was no one coming after them. The euphoric videos didn't age well. The chant from that ballroom in Thailand, BitConnect, went from a rallying cry to a punchline overnight, replayed millions of times as a kind of grim joke about an entire era of greed. But it is worth being clear about who that man was. Carlos Matos was not the mastermind. He was an investor and a promoter, one of the loudest, yes, but he was never charged with any crime. And like so many others, he lost his own money when it fell. He was the face of the hype. The people who built the machine were somewhere else entirely. And as investigators finally started pulling the threads, they found that the man at the very center of it had already begun to disappear. The reckoning, when it came, was the largest of its kind. In September 2021, the Securities and Exchange Commission charged BitConnect, its founder, Satish Kumbhani, and its top U.S. promoter with running a fraudulent and unregistered offering that took in more than $2 billion from investors. At the time, it was the largest cryptocurrency fraud the SEC had ever brought. That top U.S. promoter was a man named Glenn Arcaro, and Arcaro did something the others did not. He admitted it. Arcaro pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud, acknowledging that BitConnect operated as a Ponzi scheme and that he had personally earned millions promoting it. In 2022, he was sentenced to around 3 years in prison in order to pay back what he'd taken. The Justice Department moved to sell off tens of millions of dollars in cryptocurrency seized in the case to try to compensate the victims. One of the largest such seizures of its moment. That is the closest this story comes to justice, because the man whose name was on the whole thing was already gone. In February 2022, a U.S. grand jury indicted Satish Kumbhani, the founder of BitConnect, charging him with orchestrating a Ponzi scheme that took in around $2.5 billion, and warning that, if convicted, he faced up to 70 years in prison. But by then, Kumbhani had vanished. United States prosecutors said he had fled his home country of India, and that his whereabouts were unknown. Securities regulators said much the same. They could not locate him to serve him. The man at the center of the most infamous Ponzi scheme in crypto history simply stepped out of frame, and, as far as the public record shows, has never been found. So here is where BitConnect leaves us, a coin chanted by thousands. Billions of dollars gone in an afternoon. A promoter in a cell, a meme that outlived the money, and at the very top, an empty chair. No verdict, no location, no face the public would even recognize. And the strangest part is that the warning was never hidden. It wasn't buried in the fine print or disguised by clever accounting. It was the headline. 1% a day, forever. Because forever was the lie. Nothing pays 1% a day from trading. Not for a year, not for a month, not for a week. A number that compounds that fast can only be fed by the next person through the door, and the next, until there is no next. The crowd in that ballroom thought they were cheering an investment. They were cheering their own place in line. So what do you think? Were the people in that room victims, or were they in on it the moment they started recruiting their friends? Tell me below. And here's the rule that would have saved every one of them. If something promises you a guaranteed impossible yield on your crypto, ask where the money actually comes from. And until you get a real answer, hold your own coins. Not your keys, not your coins. The hardware wallet link is in the description. Next week, a married couple, a multi-billion-dollar Bitcoin heist, and a cringe rap video that helps sink them. The strange case of Razzle Khan and the BitConnect hack. Subscribe so you don't miss it.